I am Earl Underwood, a great-great-great-grandson of Josiah and Elmira Taylor Worthington. I'm here to share with you in a small way the history of the Worthington family. It is important to remember that as I share this in August of 2003, that in a few months or years, we may find information that will contradict what you hear today. It has been our intent with this video to bring to the family what we know the past 200 years so that the family will be able to share their history. We want to thank those of our relatives who have done research which has been used by the present researchers to give you what we have found. In the middle of the 20th century, two descendants of Richard Worthington, the son of Josiah and Elmira, collected much data on the Worthington, Albee, Reed, and Jewell lines. These two were Bessie Worthington Farrell and Mrs. Ralph Reed, her husband being a descendant of Richard. Recently, we found a descendant of John Worthington, youngest child of Josiah. His name is Cliff Worthington. He's 91 and lives in California, and he is presently sharing some of what he has with us. Two of us, Rudy Worthington and myself, have been doing research on this family with particular interest today in William Worthington, a second-generation member of the family. In Lincolnshire County in England is a small town by the name of Worthington. It lies just to the northeast of Birmingham, England, and just to the southeast of Liverpool. It is most likely that our family came from this place either through Kent County or through Liverpool to Virginia in the late 1700s. The first couple came with at least their son, and he married in Virginia, and by 1810 these families were living in Washington County, Ohio. Washington County lies on the Ohio River in the southeastern part of the state of Ohio. Our earliest ancestor of the Worthington clan was born here in 1816 near Marietta, Ohio. Marietta is the county seat. He may very well have had at least one brother, as the only Worthington family in Washington County in 1820 shows two children under the age of 5, and both were boys. In 1837, Josiah Worthington marries Elmira Taylor, the daughter of Richard Taylor and Freedom Carpenter. Elmira Taylor had been born in Lower Canada in 1818. She was born probably on the edge of the state of New York in upstate. Her father had lived with the Indians in New York and seems to have been befriended by a tribe of Indians in Ohio. Elmira had a number of siblings, including Amos. Amos plays a key role in the movement west of this family. By 1840, Elmira and Josiah have at least one child, a boy. The name of this child might have been William, but we are not sure. Our William is shown as 10 years old in 1850, which would make him the possible first child of Josiah and Elmira. But the rest of his life, William gives his birth date as 1842, meaning there might have been an older child that died in early childhood. By 1850, the first generation of Worthingtons have 3 boys and 1 girl. Sometime in the mid-1850s, the family moves to a community called Gray. Where is Gray? William's obituary gives this place as in Indiana, with the family moving there in 1855. But we find no Gray, Indiana. But there is a Gray in Washington County, Ohio, and it seems to fit that the family would have moved for a year before going west in 1855 to this place. In that year, Elmira and her husband traveled down the Ohio to Cincinnati and then to Perry County, Indiana. Perry County, Indiana is located on the Ohio River at one of the southernmost places. We are told by Bessie Farrell that her grandfather, Richard, was born in Cincinnati in 1855, so this is the child born on the way to their destination. The family would have first come to Derby, Indiana in Perry County, as it is the first town to be approached by the river. If we look at this map of Perry County, we note that the Ohio River comes down the eastern edge of this county in southern Indiana, and the first town is Derby. It's not the only town in Perry County on the river. There are two others that are very, very important, Tell City and Cannleton. Tell City is well known for its hardwood furniture, so our family was living in this area. Why they came here is unknown, but it seems possible that the Andersons, that is the wife of Amos Taylor, were living here. Amos may have made the move with his wife, and then Elmira was encouraged to move to be near her brother and encouraged her family to be there. All of the Worthington family purchased land in the area just west of Derby, and their lives were involved in this place until 1872. One of the children of Elmira and Josiah, that of Rebecca, would remain here her entire life until her death in 1934. Also, two of the children of Elmira and Josiah, Elisha and William, would return here from time to time, and both married their second wives in Perry County. By 1860, the family was composed of Josiah and Elmira, their 7 children, William, Elisha, Louis, Rebecca, Eliza, Richard, and John. William being the oldest, followed by Elisha, Louis, Elizabeth, Rebecca, Richard, and John. This is their family chart. All of these children marry in Perry County, Indiana between 1866 and 1877, except Louis and John. Louis was a child with many illnesses. He may have had serious mental deficiencies from birth or from being ill with measles and other fevers. He died without marrying between 1889 and 1898 in Oklahoma. Sometime around 1870, Amos Taylor leaves Indiana. Also, Samuel Miller and his wife, Eliza Worthington Miller, leave Perry County. Where they went, we do not know. But by 1875, Eliza and family are in Wabash County, Illinois, and she remains there until her death in 1886. Wabash is just on the border of Illinois and Indiana, northwest of Perry County. Eliza's husband, Samuel Miller, dies in 1891 in a county which we have not yet identified. They are both buried in Wabash County. After being in Indiana for 17 years, most of the family left for Kansas. It seems that Elisha must have moved west with his family and Amos Taylor to Fillmore County, Nebraska, but then moved on to Norton County, Kansas. Fillmore County is just above the Nebraska-Kansas border, and Norton County is just on the south side in Kansas from Nebraska. The parents and other children, not including Richard, Rebecca, and Eliza, who were spoken about above, went directly to Norton County, Kansas, meaning the whole family now resides in that county, except those who remain east. Times were difficult in Kansas during the 1873 to 1875 period, with grasshoppers and drought. But then times must have been good enough to encourage others of the family to come west. It is in 1877 that most of the men of the family go back to Indiana with a wagon and with a wagon train of 39 individuals travel to Leavenworth, Kansas between July and September. They made this trek up through Wabash County, across Missouri to Leavenworth, which is on the eastern edge of the state of Kansas. Josiah and Elmira lived in Norton County in the western part of that state until 1884, when they went to Marshall County. From this point on, we have no information on where they went. Some speculation is that Josiah had a sister in Ohio, and she had died in 1884, and they went back to Washington County. Or, other speculation is that they went to Illinois, where their daughter was living, and when she died, they helped with the minor children. Or, maybe they went south to Arkansas. Amos Taylor's wife had family that went to Arkansas in 1884 from Fillmore County. They would have traveled right through Marshall County, And many of these people went to Arkansas and died because of malaria, or went back to Nebraska because of that disease. We are still seeking information on where Elmira and Josiah died. William and his family, who had been living in Norton County in 1877 to 1880, remained in Norton County and then went to Marshall County as well. They crossed the state and went back to Marshall County. They and their family lived in this area until the death of Mary Ann Frances Salmon Worthington in 1913. In 1917, William goes back by train to Perry County and marries a childhood friend, Mary Anson. William brings her back to Kansas, where they lived in Blue Rapids until the death of William in 1924. He claimed his age at the time of his death to be 82, but it could have been 84. His wife, Mary Anson Worthington, following his death, returned to Perry County. Elisha, the second child, was married to Lucinda Hemphill, and they had 5 children. Their first child committed suicide in Norton County in 1886. Around 1888 or 89, the family moved to Eufaula, Oklahoma, which is in McIntosh County. It was here in 1890 that Lucinda dies, and Elisha goes and marries Elizabeth Elder in Perry County, Indiana. Elisha's family remained in Oklahoma until 1898, when Elisha disappears. That is, we have no more records of where he went. A daughter, Frances, marries Charles Houston and moves to Ford County, Kansas, then in New Mexico, and then back to Ford County, where she dies in 1904. A son, Josiah P. Worthington, sometimes called Doc, and a photographer, marries in Pottawatomie County, Oklahoma, a Mattie Murray. These two moved to southern and then northern Colorado and then to Salt Lake City, Utah, where he died in 1916. One other child of Elisha, John A. Worthington, dies in 1901, but the place is not known to us. We still have no record of where Elisha died, although family tradition indicates that it happened about 1901. Rebecca, the fourth child of Josiah and Elmira, marries David Alvey, and they remain with their children in Perry County and are buried in Smith Cemetery, just west of Derby, Indiana. Much research has been done on the Alvey family, and there are at least 2 books which contain data on this family. Richard, the 6th child, married Elizabeth Reed, also a descendant of an Alvey family. They traveled east to Marshall County, and it was here that they lived until 1892. They may have left from time to time, but eventually they went to Canadian County, Oklahoma, which is west of where his brother was living. They had 3 children, and one of them married here in 1899. Richard and family then moved to Gainesville, Texas in 1900 in Cook County, which is right on the border with Oklahoma and Texas. They remained there for 3 years, and in about 1903, the family went back to Oklahoma, this time living in Radon until 1908. In that year, the parents, their 3 children, and their families traveled to north central Washington. Sometime about 1905 to 1908, this family had visited William in the Blue Rapids area. They remained in Washington and the Canadian border area for the rest of Richard and Elizabeth's life. Richard and Elizabeth died in 1938 in the very northern part of central Washington. John, the youngest and 7th child of Josiah and Elmira's family, lives in Norton County until 1884, when he and his wife go to Arkansas. He married his wife, Nancy Jane Carnes, in 1880 in Norton County, and following their trek to Arkansas near Fort Smith, they moved to be near his brother in Eufaula, Oklahoma. John's wife dies in the first few years of the 20th century, and John remains in that area of Oklahoma until his death in 1936. John and Nancy had 9 children, but 4 of them died in infancy. And within the family, there was at least one set of twins. The eldest son was Isaac, who married Geneva Wood and moved to Smith County, Texas. It was here that they raised their family and are buried. 2 of the daughters of John, Lizzie and Laura, Lizzie and Pearl, married the same man, Sherman U. Warner. Lizzie died in 1990, and following her death, her sister married him, and they then went to Tulare County, California. Molly married Howell Monroe Salmons, but they had no children. They also moved to Tulare County in California. The earliest of the California residents of this family was Richard. He was the 3rd child of John, who reached maturity. He and his wife Callie Lemming raised 5 children, 1 daughter and 4 sons, of which 2 still live in California. William and Mary, our direct line, had 2 children, Lucinda and James. Lucinda married Ira Sanders Jewell. Ira was the uncle of James' wife, Sarah, for her mother was Ira's sister. That's why they call Lucinda Aunt Sis. Ira and Lucinda had 11 children, and many of their descendants still live in the Blue Rapids area. James and Sarah had 6 children, with there being 1 set of twins. I hope as you learn more about your family, you will want to share with us the information so that we can keep as complete a record as possible. We are still researching and checking leads around the nation so that we will someday find that final link to prove which family lived in England and then came to Virginia to give us our heritage. We have 3 pictures of children of Josiah and Elmira Worthington. These 2 are William Worthington when he was visiting his sister Rebecca Worthington Elvey in Perry County, Indiana in 1917. And this is Richard Worthington and his wife Mary Elizabeth Reed Worthington, taken in the state of Washington sometime around 1930. This is William Worthington, our great-great-great-grandfather. And William was living in Blue Rapids, Kansas, one of the 3 pictures we have of children of Josiah and Elmira Taylor Worthington. This is William's wife, Mary Ann Frances Salmon Worthington. She died in 1913 in Blue Rapids, Kansas. She was born in Kentucky or southern Indiana. This is Lucinda Worthington Jewell. Lucinda was the only daughter of William and Mary Salmon Worthington. Lucinda and her husband Ira lived in the Blue Rapids, Barnes, Waterville area. This is Ira Sanders Jewell, husband of Lucinda, and the son of Charles P. Jewell and his wife Sarah Catherine Waters Jewell. This is Charles P. Jewell and his wife Sarah Catherine Waters Jewell. They lived in the Blue Rapids area and are both buried at Prospect Hill Cemetery. These are the parents of Ira Sanders Jewell, and also the parents of Lily Jewell Reedy, the mother of Sarah Reedy Worthington. This is Sarah Reedy Worthington. Sarah was the daughter of William and Lily Jewell Reedy, and Sarah was the wife of James Worthington, brother of Lucinda. This is James Worthington in the early 1900s, possibly around 1910 to 1920. James Worthington was the son of William and Mary Ann Frances Salmon Worthington, and the husband of Sarah Reedy Worthington. This is another picture of James Worthington, taken about in the early 1950s, possibly at the reunion that took place in Onega. One other picture of James Worthington, taken on his farm, probably in the 1940s. This picture is Lily Reedy and her husband William. Lily was the sister of Ira Sanders Jewell, as well as the mother of Sarah Reedy Worthington.
Done something tonight never done before. Got supper by the fireplace. Start tomorrow. Go as far as we can. Done very well. Tea was smoked, could not drink it. Must do better. Feel tired, will go to bed on the floor. Pretty hard bed. We'll get used to it.
It was July of 1877, and 39 adults and children prepared to make the trip across Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri to Kansas. The spring had been a dry one, and it was believed that the trek would be as easy as crossing creeks and marshes because they would be dry. For us to understand this major trip, we must take a couple of steps backwards. In 1872, Amos Taylor and Elisha Worthington traveled with their families to Nebraska, and Elisha's group went on to Norton County, Kansas. It's here that other Washington families also sought land and new riches. Josiah and Elmira, with their sons Louis, John, and William, and his wife and family, carved out their homes in the southeastern part of Norton County.
Sitting by the campfire with sparks flying all around. Mrs. Taylor is sitting on a log, I on a rocking chair, Nellie on my lap. We have camped near a Baptist church. Can hear them singing. Would like to go. Feel pretty tired. Got along very well today. Came 15 miles. Had pretty bad roads. Got along better than we expected. Think the roads will be better the rest of the way. Slept pretty good last night.
In 1874, there was a terrible drought, and almost all those in the county had to receive assistance from the state in order to survive. Tradition tells of a letter being sent back to Indiana asking for help by our family at this time. It would seem unlikely that with this as a backdrop, the others would desire to go to Kansas. But in the spring of 1877, Josiah, William, Elisha, Louis, and John all returned with Amos Taylor and his wife to Perry County to put together the wagon train that would take new friends and family to parts of the American desert.
Never was any gladder to see timber than tonight. Came 19 miles today, most of the way prairie. Wind blowing like 62. Thought the cover of the wagon would blow off. 2 more wagons just above us. Packed 2 more for Kansas. Like the looks of it very well today, if the wind had not blowed so.
In 1920, Bessie Farrell talked to her grandfather, Richard Worthington. He was now 64 years old and had been removed from the wagon train event for some 43 years. Bessie also must have made some assumptions, as those listed on the train are not completely accurate. We are thankful for just the basic facts about the event in order to let us know that a group did gather to make this trip in the summer of 1877. The following few paragraphs are from Bessie as she recorded them many years ago. She repeated much of what she had been told and took some editorial license as well. Wagons ho. What a sight it must have been. 14 covered wagons lined up on this hot, sultry morning in July of 1877. Gus Reed and Bill Worthington each driving lead teams. 2 supply wagons were driven by Frank Reed and John Worthington. Wagon master was Dave Alvey. Zeb and George Alvey were scouts. Sarah Reed drove her own wagon. Liz Worthington, with her books, slates, and pencils, drove her own wagon. Elisha, 22 years old, took responsibility for 2 women drivers. There were 14 children, 5 teenagers, and 20 adults. The wagons were all chosen by Josiah Worthington, rigged out by Amos Taylor, Frank Reed, and George Phillips. The finest draft horses chosen by Gus Reed, Amos Taylor, and Bill Worthington. They chose this dry year as the fords were easy to cross because of low water in creeks and streams. Plenty of drinking water from springs, plenty of grass along the streams, lots of wild fruits and game animals were theirs for the taking. They hoped to reach Fort Leavenworth, Kansas by September. They were delayed by 2 weeks when the small children had the measles, Then another few days when the children had whooping cough, the mothers found some wild horehound and the scouts found a tree of wild bees and honeys. The two finds helped the whooping cough and colds. They got to Fort Leavenworth by the time the fall rain set in, so grandfather said. They decided to stay there till spring, then head for Blue Rapids and other parts of Kansas.
I was very sleepy, went right to bed. Got up this morning, the rain just pouring down, and is yet. We are dry. Don't know how long we will be if don't stop. It beats in the sides. This is the first rain we have had. Hope we don't have any more. The men is out hunting. They will be wet through. Could not make any fire. Taylors have a stove in their wagon. Can't get it out of the wagon to cook. Would like a cup of tea. Don't feel well. The wagon train had two main groups within it. And in order for us to know those who participated, we have looked at births and census records to put families and wagons together.
These wagons and horses were not the type that were used earlier in the century, pulling by many teams of oxen. These were the light type of wagons, which were mainly for material and to help those having difficult walking.
First, William T. Reed and his wife Sarah had a large family. Many of the children of this family married others who drove wagons. One of the children of this family, Mary Eliza, married Richard Worthington, and they had their first child in August as they traveled west. William Reed had served in the Civil War in the same unit with William Worthington, Company G of the 81st Indiana Infantry. So beyond living in Perry County, Indiana, near the Worthingtons, these two men were probably close friends. William Reed and family ended up in Norton County, Kansas, in the same area as William and his parents. William T. Reed also goes back east to Marshall County, Kansas, just as William Worthington did. David's wife, Cynthia's mother Melvina, her father was deceased, also traveled on this train west with her two brothers, Henry and Thomas, and sister Margaret and Henry's family. Another of the children of William and Sarah Reed married George Alvey, and another daughter, Elizabeth, married George W. Phelps. Their granddaughter would be Doris Vale, wife of Dick Worthington. These families then made up the majority of the wagon train's group. Of the group that traveled west, only one person is unknown to us. He was Zeb Elvey. Zeb must have been a nickname.
You can see from this chart how the wagons and riders were divided up. In wagon number 1, the wagon master David C. Elvey. In wagon 2, David Gus Reed and wife Cynthia. Wagon 3, Bill Worthington. Wagon 4, Frank Reed. Wagon 5, John Worthington. Wagon 6, Josiah Worthington. Wagon 7, Amos Taylor. Wagon 8, Sarah Reed and daughter, wife of a scout named George. In wagon 9, George W. Phelps and wife Mahana and son. In wagon 10, Richard Worthington and his pregnant wife, Mary Elizabeth. In wagon 11 and 12, William and Sarah Reed and family. In wagon 13, Henry and Susan Elvey and possibly 2 children. And in wagon 14, Malvina and her 2 unmarried children. The group traveled to the expressway of Indiana on the north edge of Perry County. Each day they would travel about 15 miles. After they got to the log road, they turned west and went toward Wabash County, Illinois. Within a week, they probably stopped to see Eliza and Samuel Miller. Eliza was a daughter of Josiah and Elmira Worthington and had married Samuel in Perry County, but moved to Wabash County, Illinois in 1872 to 1874. This may have been the same time that Amos went to Nebraska, because the Millers had been gone in 1870, as were the Taylors.
Mary A., most crazy with toothache, had it for several days, is worse today. Many are not feeling well. We may stop and get some rest.
Somewhere in Illinois, a number of the children and others came down with whooping cough. Also on the trip, the measles struck, and the two events caused a halt for the extension of 2 weeks. Richard and Eliza's baby was born in August in Missouri. There is a debate by some of the descendants about when this birth took place, but the census material closest to the event indicates the daughter was born in August of 1877. Whether a birth stopped the train for a period of time is not known, but we do know that the travel to Leavenworth was about 511 miles. It took them around 6 weeks or 42 days. In 42 days of travel, the wagon could have made 630 miles. The 14 wagons arrived in Leavenworth, Kansas in the fall of 1877.
The trek had taken them from Perry County to Illinois, across that state to St. Louis, then along the Missouri River to Kansas City, and then north to Leavenworth. Excerpts from a diary of another family on their way to Pottawatomie County, Kansas, are used here to give us a feel for some of the hardships which families had on traveling west. One needs to remember that the railroad was already traveling west as far north as Norton County. Upon arriving in Leavenworth, our information is that the family stayed until spring, but records both in Norton and Perry counties dispute this fact. Richard Elvey, whose wife had stayed in Indiana, returned there soon after arriving in Leavenworth. The family did not come with Richard on the wagon train as a family, but came in about 1885 to Kansas. In the winter of 1877, Elisha is in Norton, Kansas. His wife, as well as his mother, are there on the prairie. Whether others also spread out and continued the trip, we are unsure, but there were certainly family members alone who would have appreciated their presence. In future years, many of the families made the trip back to Perry County. At least Elisha and William returned for second wives. It became easier and easier as train traffic improved the travel and the amount of time it took. We cannot imagine what those members of this wagon train would think today of the speed with which we travel across Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri.